Hey there, everyone. I received a really good question from someone, and I told her that I would answer it in the way of a video, also keeping her name totally anonymous, because sometimes I feel like I'm better at speaking than writing or typing on a keyboard. I can say what I need to say and answer it better, and you'll see my emotions. So let's do this in a video question format. Hi, Dr. Dave. I've been suffering from anxiety for over 10 years now, and my antidepressants aren't really helping me anymore, which is why I decided to give mushrooms a try. There was one video of yours that totally relates to what I've been going through for so many years, and it was about driving anxiety. I grew up in San Francisco and I still live in the Bay Area, and my driving anxiety has affected a lot of my relationships because I've avoided driving on certain highways, especially bridges and tunnels that are required for me to take in order to see some of my friends. I also can't drive at night because it feels like I can't see as clearly, and on top of it, I get anxious when I have passengers in the car other than my son. So this driving anxiety that I've been dealing with has totally controlled my life, and I've had enough. Since microdosing, I've noticed that I'm not as anxious driving anymore, but there is still some anxiety that happens. But I am now able to control it better. So my question to you is this: how long after you started microdosing did you notice your anxiety while driving just disappear? I just want to be able to enjoy driving again and go wherever I want, whenever I want, with whomever I want. It would just give me that sense of freedom that I desperately need. So that's a great question, and thanks so much for writing in on that. Yeah, I had some, I'll share my personal experience because I don't really have anyone else's experience about driving, but I can certainly share my story, which seems to be very, very similar to yours, and it does have a happy ending, so hang in there and listen, please. I noticed, along with my anxiety that started creeping into my life, driving was getting more and more difficult. One of the first things I noticed is that, after dark in the night, I wouldn't have as much confidence because it seems like I just couldn't see as well as other people seemingly could see on the road at night. And I just started doing things that just seemed like I was making some mistakes, like especially when I was making a left-hand turn in a lot of traffic, and then the place I turned to the left would be a little bit unknown because I wasn't really familiar with the road, and sometimes I couldn't tell exactly where I was going to go. Once I cleared traffic, I couldn't tell exactly what lane I should be in, and that was kind of, that made me pretty anxious for sure. One of the most, two of the most anxiety-ridden experiences I had, I remember one time. Now we moved to Salt Lake City, and one time a few years ago, 3 years ago or so, something like that, 4 years ago. It doesn't really matter when, but I was driving home one evening from Park City. And those of you that are familiar, that have been here, driving from Park City back down to Salt Lake City, you kind of take this interstate highway, I-80, but then it starts going through a canyon. And even though it's an interstate, it kind of winds through a canyon. Not necessarily difficult, but for some reason I had a near panic attack doing this in the evening. It was snowing some also, and it just made things feel really weird, and I got into this almost trance-like state that I felt like it was very weird. I felt uncomfortable driving, the anxiety was going through the roof, and it was just a really horrible situation. Not only that, I remember oftentimes after a full day of skiing, or even a half day of skiing, driving back from Park City down to Salt Lake City, I would ask my wife to drive because I would just tell her I'm too tired, I don't really feel like driving back. But in reality, the reason was I get anxious driving through that canyon road on Interstate 80. It just was very hilly, like a long descent. I just felt very anxious doing it. There was another time we were driving our van, and we were going on some canyon roads, and there were some areas where there were sheer cliffs on the right. Like anybody that lives in a mountainous type area knows that sometimes you're going around a mountain pass or a mountainous road, and you're driving around, and all of a sudden you look to the right or look to the left, and there's nothing there except a cliff. And if you go over that cliff, you're gone. So all these things started getting me super, super anxious to drive, especially on mountain roads, canyon roads, hilly roads, it just in the dark, it kind of came together, and it was really, really, really tough. So when I was prescribed my Lexapro, which is an antidepressant and anti-anxiety from my psychiatrist, and things did start. This was before I started microdosing, before I knew anything about magic mushrooms. Things definitely started getting a little bit better, and I felt like a little more confident, but not great, but I just felt like my heart wasn't beating as fast when I was going through these weird roads that I didn't really love. So I felt a little bit better for sure. Then I found the microdosing. I found the magic mushrooms. And like I've said before, a lot of people ask me the question, well, how long did it take? How long did it take till you felt better? Tell me how, because I'm horrible. And I totally get that. And I know you really want to feel better like today. I get that. I totally get it. But what I want you to do is think about how long it took your body to get to the state where it is now, where you're going through a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and whatever it might be. You didn't just wake up one morning and your body said to you, oh, I'm gonna be super anxious today, I'm gonna be depressed. No, it starts very, very slowly, and it starts creeping up. And at first you probably don't even notice it, but it starts slowly, it starts creeping up until one day it hits you, wham! Like, I've got a lot of anxiety, or I'm depressed, or I just don't feel right. Something's not right that I need to fix. And this happens generally over a long period of time. Again, you just don't wake up with that. So once you start realizing that and doing things right, which could be anything to help your body, but in particular, I'm talking about starting to use magic mushrooms. They made me feel good quickly, but they didn't fix me quickly, if that makes sense. So let me go back. Now, some of this might have been placebo when I did all this reading and I heard about magic mushrooms. So the first dose I took, and I talked to you about that, I think, the other day, I felt better. But it might have been psychological. I don't know. But nevertheless, I did feel better. But over time, and let's talk about my time frame. It took me 1.5 years until I said, I don't need these anymore. I'm totally fine. And I'll use them as needed if I want to, but I don't need them anymore. I'm fine. That wasn't overnight. It wasn't 3 weeks. It wasn't a month. I hate to say to anybody that wants like a quick fix and I want to be done now. It's at least with microdosing. Macrodosing might be different. And any of my macrodose friends, Trip, Geraint can, I hope that I pronounce your name right, because I don't know how to pronounce your name exactly. Especially Trip, because I've had many conversations with Trip about this. Everybody I talked to with macrodosing said it works much faster and stronger also. But I've got to talk about microdosing because that's what I've done over the past 1.5 years, and that's what I'm not. I wouldn't say like an expert, but I totally understand it, and I understand dosing, and I understand how long things take. It's not going to be overnight. So what I'm going to say is keep doing it. Stay on your regimen. If you have not watched my video, The Absolute Beginner's Guide to Microdosing Magic Mushrooms, I strongly recommend you watch that, because a lot of the questions people ask are answered right in that video. Please watch it. But enjoy the ride, and enjoy that on a gradual basis. You're going to be getting better and better and better. So where I stand right now, 1.5 years after I started microdosing, driving is actually a pleasure now. It's fun. I drive at night. I drive on canyon roads. I drive on mountain roads. My wife and I were just on a road the other day. Where were we driving? I can't remember. Somewhere a little south of here in Utah. And it was like a long loop. And some of these areas had the typical cliff drop off. And I was even able to look to my right and say, wow, that's a really nice cliff there. But it doesn't bother me anymore. So this stuff is all in our brains. It's not like we're born to be afraid to drive, or born to be, it's a learned type behavior where something's happened over the years that we've acquired this behavior that we have things that we're either afraid to do, or when we do them, we have a lot of anxiety, but it's a mental thing. And I'm proof of that, because I would have near panic attacks when I drove in certain situations and certain conditions, and I don't have those anymore at all. So I'm really sorry that I don't have an exact time frame, and I can't say to you, okay, after 2 months you're going to be 100% fine, because I can't promise that. You may be, but I can't promise that. But before I close, I want to share something really important with you, because I know this, we talk about microdosing magic mushrooms and using psilocybin, which is the active ingredient, but also, and I'm going to probably, I've got to touch on this in a future video or podcast or something, but there are other things we need to be doing, some types of work along with microdosing. Microdosing is not just popping a pill and hoping for the best like we do with SSRIs or other types of antidepressants or anti-anxiety agents. There's work that goes along with this. There's shadow work, there's meditation, there's yoga, there's mantras in the morning, there's believing that certain things about your life, everything's beautiful here, and I'm going to be positive, and I've got a shield around me protecting me from negative and bad, and things like there's work that you have to do along with that. Also, I'm going to recommend that I need to do another video about this, or podcast, I should say, because some people watch the video, some people listen to the audio. But many of you may have other medical conditions or things that, and none of this is to be taken as actual official medical advice, but many of you may have other things going on that you need to work on. The biggest example I can think of off the top of my head is sleep apnea, mainly obstructive sleep apnea. It is a killer. It's a slow killer, and it absolutely will cause high blood pressure, anxiety, depression, and it's more prevalent than we think. And I personally think it's more prevalent than medical doctors think it is, because I've been through it. I understand it very, very well. Just real briefly, sleep apnea is when you've got some type of condition, and in the middle of the night, it could be an obstruction. It could be your brain is not sending proper signals to breathe, but there's some reason in the middle of the night or all night long, there are periods that you stop breathing. And what happens there is your oxygen level dips way down. Sometimes it wakes you up, sometimes it doesn't. But low oxygen saturation will, in your tissues, in your bloodstream and your tissues, will wreak havoc on your body, and it's really, really serious. And a lot of people have it and don't know it. And this could be something that plays into the fact that some of you have anxiety and depression and really don't know where it's coming from. I'm not saying you have sleep apnea, but it's absolutely something you need to look into, especially if you're a little bit bigger, you've got some excess pounds, you've got a bigger neck, you've been told you snore at night, you're frequently tired during the day. There are a lot of other things, but those are the main ones. Look into it. I'm telling you, the only way to tell if you have obstructive sleep apnea or some type of sleep apnea is by doing a sleep study or a home sleep test or in a sleep lab. I can't emphasize enough how important I think this is if you feel like you're in even slightly risk for sleep apnea, which you may not know until you do a sleep study. It's a whole nother topic that I can talk on, because it's super, super important. And I can use some of my experience of I'm a retired dentist. I'm not a medical doctor, but I've learned so much about this stuff because I've had this stuff. I've had it. And when you have it personally, you make it your life's mission to work on it and figure it out like I have done. So to close the question and me giving the answer, it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. At least it happened with me. But it's sometimes a slow process, and you're not gonna realize that, okay, now I'm fixed, because until it gets to the point where you really are. So enjoy the journey, enjoy the microdosing, enjoy what it has to offer, and enjoy feeling a little bit better maybe every day, or some days you'll have some bad days, but it goes with the territory, and you will ultimately be fine, at least from my experience. I hope this answered your question. Long-winded. You can see why I like talking into a camera or in a microphone better than having my pen or even my fingers on the keyboard. I can't do that as well. I hope this helps you. Love you. Talk to you soon.